evening everyone. Today we are going to have a quick look at this beautiful Camarasaurus figure from Haolonggood. Of course PNSO have also released a larger Camarasaurus figure. However, I don't have that figure. It is on my wish list. Unfortunately, space is a major consideration at the minute. Simply don't have the space for the figures I have without adding more to them. So I can't do a direct comparison. However, I can take you through some of the finer details of this particular figure. So first off, looking at the shape of the head and the skull, this is very much in keeping with what you would expect for any Camarasaurus species. There are at least 3 species known for Camarasaurus in various sizes. Some of them were on the larger side for sauropods, but most of them are quite average sized. So the detailing on the face of Haolonggoods is quite traditional in that there are no particularly flashy wattles or an extensive amount of flesh on the skull. The flesh across the nose is continued down to give it this curve instead of it dipping and then protruding, and the nostrils are placed at the front. It's got very large eyes. The eye sockets of Camarasaurus were of course very large, and those eyes are painted in a beautiful bright blue colour which really suits this figure. I know bright blue is quite a common colour for dinosaur eyes now, but it really does work on this Camarasaurus, and especially with the size of the eyes they've chosen for this figure, it really pops and it gives it a really lovely, gentle expression. It's got a very expressive face, this figure, and it really is beautifully sculpted. It is possibly what some may term a little bit shrink wrapped. I'm personally not particularly bothered about shrink wrapping, as you know, quite frequently you see examples in nature where there are bones protruding through the tissue. You see them quite blatantly under the skin, so I'm not particularly bothered when it comes to dinosaurs. And they had huge fenestrae in the skulls which were clearly an adaptation to reducing weight. The chances are that there probably was a bit more flesh on the skulls than what you see in the shrink wrapped examples, but this really does not detract from this figure at all. It's not something that we can say for certain. And what they've done here with this Camarasaurus is not only have they given it plenty of flesh across the snout, they've also given it the keratinous beak around the lips. It really is an absolutely stunning figure. You know, lovely detailing and wrinkling around the eyes as well. Lots of very fine detail. Because it's such a large figure, it's quite difficult for me to do close-ups for you, unfortunately. I might go freehand and do the detail a bit later. As you can see, they've opted to put a row of spines down the neck. These dip away over the shoulders where there would be a lot of flexing, so clearly they've considered this in the sculpt. They come up again a little bit over the back, a little bit like its cousin Saltosaurus. It's got these little ornamental scales, osteoderms, in the skin here, which is an interesting touch, and they look really nice. And then again, this long tail, this long flexible tail is devoid of any neural sort of vertical spines over the hips or anything. Really, really nicely done. The muscles are nicely picked out here, beautifully sculpted, lovely wrinkling behind the thighs and down the back of the tail. Lovely coloration. This blue again sort of reflects that which you see on the head. And really in terms of the bulk of the body as well, that's really, really nicely done. This looks extremely realistic, and as you can see, there's a bit of detail on the other side of the feet, and that the feet are the correct horseshoe shape at the front here. There's also the cloacal vent down the back, very important for our dinosaur to go to the toilet. Now the coloration of this particular version is very, very pleasing. It's quite difficult to choose coloration with Haolonggood dinosaurs sometimes because they offer us so much choice, but inevitably there is occasionally a little bit of crossover with how the colours are used across different models. So when it comes to the sauropods, you're trying to get something which isn't going to blend in against all the other sauropods. It's very, very tricky to do. They really are providing us with fantastic model sauropods at the minute. And there is, of course, an upcoming Brachiosaurus, which demonstrates a slight difference in the way they've reconstructed the beak and the teeth at the front. Personally, I don't mind that. Models are an excellent place for experimental sculpts and anything, you know, that might have been theorised in the past, which might not still be current now. It's still a fabulous thing to see. I'm not personally picking up the Brachiosaurus, again, because of space considerations and also because I have the Alamosaurus, and in terms of overall body shape, I simply couldn't justify having the Brachiosaurus as well, especially not so hot on the heels of that amazing Argentinosaurus that Haolonggood have provided for us. The coloration is all very, very subtle with this figure. There's nothing flashy here, but there are beautiful transitions between the chocolatey stripes and these orange and ochre hues and the slightly greenish tones down the neck. And the transitions all the way along are really very nicely done. Now, nobody can do this like PNSO and Haolonggood can when they're on form. Of course, both companies have examples where they're a little bit hit and miss. This is one of Haolonggood's better examples in terms of the coloration and in terms of how that's applied. It really is excellent. This figure has so much character and it's definitely one of my favourite sauropod figures. This is one that's been long requested for a review, so what I'll do is I'll pop her down and I'll go freehand and hopefully show you some of the finer details. So here we have a close-up of the head of Haolonggood's Camarasaurus. This really shows you the blue of the eye and the subtlety of the sculpt of the face here. As you can see, it really is very expressive. The paint application is excellent. There's even a slight tinge around the mouth here, which makes it really defined. The creases around the border of the mouth. The beak on this one is done extraordinarily well. I really do feel that this is one of Haolonggood's best sculpts. And I know that the PNSO one is extraordinary, but there's something about this one which I'm always going to love this particular sculpt. It's so nicely done. As you can see here, it's possibly to do with the way it's painted as well, but you can see a little bit more of the bone structure around the face and around the eyes. As I say, I'm not particularly bothered about that because you do see the bones through even mammal flesh on occasion, so it's not something that I'm particularly troubled by. I know that the PNSO one has none whatsoever. There's a lot of flesh on the head of that figure. If I just come back and have a very slow pan down the body, you can see how fine the scaling, detailing is. And you can also see that the spines along the back are a slightly different colour as well. Invariably, there is a little bit of blending from the paint application on the back, but most of them are a slightly different colour, which is a nice realistic touch. You can also see they're all different sort of heights and different stages of weathering, which is a very realistic and organic look. Coming down the body here, you really can see a better view of all these little osteoderms and ornamental scales, and you can really see the bulk of the body, and with the lighting here you can see some of the muscles under the flesh as well, and just a hint of the shoulder blade. Beautiful wrinkling and muscular detail. These have been sculpted very nicely here, and the quadrifemoralis muscle going down the tail. So all that's left really is to do some finer details in terms of weight. Right, I've got my kitchen scales here. If I just pop our Camarasaurus onto them. You can see she's under 1 kilogram in weight. She's about 3/4 of a kilogram in weight, which isn't too bad for such a large figure. And here I have the Camarasaurus with a couple of similarly sized model sauropods. So here at the front we have Eophauna's Atlasaurus, which is a little bit taller than the Camarasaurus, but a lot shorter and a lot finer, as you can see. This to me is one of Eofauna's finest sculpts, and I quite like the experimentation that they do with coloration on heads and things like that. Although some find it a little jarring, but I quite like that. I think that's a lovely looking figure. And of course the detailing on this one too is very, very good. There's a lot of very fine details on the body of this one. You can really see now that the companies are becoming much of a muchness in terms of realism of detail. Now here we have an interesting example, because this is PNSO's Ling Wulong, which is of course an early relative of the likes of Dicraeosaurus, Amargasaurus. And as you can see, this one has the exposed teeth look. It's got a fantastically realistic sculpt to the head. It really do. PNSOs, a lot of their figures look like little living animals that have just sort of been captured in time in solid form. So you can see the detailing on this one is finer than either Haolonggood's Camarasaurus or Eofauna's Atlasaurus. It really is an extraordinary figure, but I know that some people might be put off by these teeth, even though they are extremely well painted. It's not a look that seems particularly likely, but then the beak theory is not something that has been proven as of yet either. This is all sort of very theoretical when you look at these figures. You can see there's a lot of ornamental scales across the shoulders. Maybe PNSO's sculptor was considering this dinosaur pushing its way through dense undergrowth with these ornaments here on the limbs. Either way, it is an absolutely exceptional figure. But out of the three of them, I have to say, my favourite is by far and away Haolonggood's Camarasaurus, and that is purely because of the character that they have imbued this figure with. So I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this figure with me, and I hope to see you in the next video.